Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rain Reviews. Today, we're going to talk about some stuff. We're going to talk about, this fighter, Alana okay, bear with me. Alana McLaughlin. Got it. All right. Alana McLaughlin is a transgender mixed martial arts fighter. As someone who was originally a man, is fighting in women's MMA against the woman here. Her name is Celine Provost. I don't like how Alana McLaughlin is so much of the forefront of the news on this, whereas Celine Provost is just kind of like not. She's in the background of this. I don't think that already says a lot to me about it, right? But we're going to talk about this and how it relates to a whole bunch of other things that have been going on. I'm pretty sure you guys have heard of Dave Chapelle and his recent his recent comedy show, The Closer. Very telling name, if you ask me. And then we're going to get into a person that I respect and revere as an intelligent person hereafter that I think that you guys should be. All right, so disclaimer already. I've already seen this fight. I'm going to rewatch it just kind of to refresh my memory and give you guys sort of a live reaction. But I've already seen this fight. Off of rip, I like to analyze this part of the fight. That Alana, I'm going to refer to them as Alana and Celine from here on out. But Alana here to the right is 3 years older with a few inches shorter. They're 5 inches shorter in height. And Celine also has a reach advantage of, 5 or 4.5 inches, whereas Alana does have a 2-pound weight advantage. So Alana is the smaller stature, shorter stature, whereas Celine is a bit longer and a bit taller with slightly thinner in terms of weight. All right, now bear with me here because I'm genuinely just going to watch this from the perspective of a fight fan first. We'll talk about all of the controversial topics and everything else about how I feel about it later. I just want to look at this from the perspective of a fight.
There'll be a time where this isn't a shock to the system, but we will find out as Provost comes out swinging as we expected.
Celine's peppering Alana with shots that she throws a leg kick
a lot of
already.
boxing, a lot of kickboxing.
And we could see it right here, right from the get-go. Max
Return leg kick.
Distance, using her hands, her kicks. Now Alana needs to put her head up.
Yep.
She's putting her head down, which is very, 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 very hard here. It's not.
Right. Their commentators are talking about it. Alana's coming in with her head down and pressing forward and trying to land in shots. That's a way of a fighter that doesn't really have that good of striking. They basically are trying to use their brute force to come in and power their way through it. They figure, hey, I can eat a shot and give a shot, and it's typically from somebody who's having trouble closing distance, and so they just kind of press forward and decide that, hey, if I just tilt my head down, I can eat more shots on the forehead. I can protect my nose, I can protect my mouth, I can protect my jawline better if I just don't look at them and come in with my head down and bull rush them, right? But it's not working as Celine is a clearly experienced striker. She's keeping her distance and using her reach advantage to pepper Alana with shots, and that's exactly how she should fight. The strategy that Alana is using will eventually lead to her her getting knocked out if she continues like that.
Not a very good thing to do. Celine could just hit her quickly with an uppercut, and that's all she wrote. She tried to go there for.
Right, so like that push kick right there was an example of a distance creating shot. And you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Alana's coming in with these heavier shots, just trying to brute force their way in.
This is what Celine did not want this fight to go. As Alana working her way here. And by the way, she is a U.S. Army veteran, so thank her, since tomorrow is September 11th.
Yes. We're actually about 25 minutes from...
That's something I haven't heard anybody talk about in this sort of story here, that this Alana fighter here is actually a veteran. I did not know that.
The U.S. Army Special Forces had a tour in Afghanistan as well.
She did connect. Celine connected there very, very hard in the head. And another right hook.
Just a ton of activity, a volume of punches for Provost.
Now, interesting to note, Max, if we heard earlier from the interview that Alana was saying that after she took all the attempt to make that transition, her power, her strength wasn't the same.
Yep. Provost took a big right cross.
And Celine's going to keep going with that 1-2.
And another big uppercut.
Now, Alana's just...
You can see that toll being taken, right? Like I said, if you come in like that, you're going to get peppered with shots. You're eventually going to get knocked out. And you can see that it's taking a toll on the fighter at this point.
And McLaughlin has to survive here. Provost will just continue to fire, but you can't keep punching like that for this entire fight. Maybe not even for this entire round. Another big right hand get.
Now, don't get it messed up. Coming in like Alana's doing and bull rushing and looking for heavy shots can work. It's just not going to be a good strategy if you're not keeping your eyes on your opponent. You probably noticed at times that Celine would miss the shot just by happenstance of how Alana's moving. Now, if Alana came in and, you know, dropped her head to the left or to the right as she pressed forward and landed a shot, now we have an effective strategy.
So we're seeing that right here, right now.
Alana Mclaughlin.
Right, you heard the in the corner talking about moving your head, and that's kind of what I was talking about.
McLaughlin absorbing pressure, surviving thus far.
Pretty decent fight so far.
Dangerous situation. It's almost like if you're walking into a pothole.
McLaughlin coming up big, and now Provost has to survive. A lot of punishments. The knees coming in. The first one connected, the second one not so much. Provost has to get out of there.
I say footwork. I say for Celine, the answer is footwork. She's letting the pace of the fight, even though she's winning the fight, in my opinion, in terms of like strikes being landed, she's letting Alana control the pace of the fight, and that's what's really putting her in the position where she's getting pressured all the time. She's letting Alana control the pace, and the reason she's able to do that is because she's not using teep kicks and front kicks as much as she should be, and she's not using her footwork to control distance. If she controls distance and she's also, you know, having Alana on the bad end of these punches and on the losing end of the exchanges, she controls the pace of a fight and she can conserve her energy a lot better. I don't know if either of them were conditioned enough or not, but the fact that they look like this in round 2, look like they've already fought a 5-round fight, that's how you know that they've been putting it all out there, and that's respectable, that's commendable.
Will bring up, and they'll beg to differ. Big, now the strength
trying to go for the double.
Go up, does pretty well, gets her on the ground. Now you can see how her ground game goes. This is for Celine Provost, the uncharted waters.
Yeah, not your typical wrestling double.
This is a really bad position for either of them. They're both exhausted, so this is a whole different level of grind. Like, both fighters are tired, and now, you know, you've got this person that's, you know, you've got your whole body weight on top of you. It's just a lot. It's a lot to try to get out of that. You're asking for a lot of energy from somebody. This triangle that she has around her leg that's probably your best bet.
Alana, and Mara is known for that overhand right, which I'm not surprised why she keeps using that, because he's telling her you have an opportunity to do that, because he's not a tall fighter, and when he competes against tall.
The reversal, again, I can't tell you how much energy that requires. It seems like they're just moving fairly slow, but I promise you this stuff it's exhausting, man.
And the tap!
And the tap for a submission win. Man, I think a lot of that came from just the sheer body weight of Alana being on top of Celine, and them both already being exhausted. Alana weathering the storm of her shots that she was getting peppered with, and the constant pressure caused Alana to kind of tire herself by not establishing distance and control. And when she got the takedown, it was really, like I said, that's tough to fight your way out of. There's so much weight on top of you with you already being exhausted. You know, it's difficult to get out of that rear naked choke at that point. Once it gets sunk in, number one, you're already exhausted, so your body is begging for oxygen, and now you're getting choked. So it's just, you know, twice as bad because of that. And then two, you have to fight off this arm that I would imagine, you know, Alana seemed like the stronger in terms of strength fighter, and so it's going to be even more difficult to peel that arm off of your neck and keep from getting choked while also being tired. Now your body's depleted of oxygen, so you're even more tired. It's just not going to happen. The moment you've all been waiting for, not about the fight, but more so about what surrounds the fight in terms of the controversy that surrounds it. Well, I heard a lot of people saying these different kind of things about the fight, how it's just not a fair competition and different things like that. And there's no way that Alana should be fighting Celine as a, someone who is in truth a man in their opinion. And for that reason, it's just disgraceful that a man would be fighting a woman or beating up on a woman on television, and that the fighting promotion should be ashamed of themselves for airing something like this. And I mean, even the video itself has a large dislike over its likes ratio. It's 90 likes and 292 dislikes. And this does seem to be the original video, which, no, it's not. But anyways, the video that I watched, it has 90 likes and 292 dislikes. People were angry at this, This is where I start with that, is that this fight, both of these fighters understood exactly who they were getting into a fight with. They had an entire training camp. They were notified months in advance. They agreed to this. They signed a contract to do so. They were paid to do this. There was an entire fight promotion leading up to this. They met this person. They weighed in against this person. All of this is heavily regulated. They check their hormone levels. They check their weight. The scrutiny, the degree of scrutiny applied to combat sports is likened to any professional sport. It's very strict. Everything is done deliberately. Everyone is under the understanding of whatever the case is exactly that, the case at hand. You cannot absolve Celine Provost of any responsibility, and I don't think that she's looking for that. In fact, I would say that you're taking away from her by saying, oh, well, she lost because of this, that, and the third. Bro, she went in there and held her own against Alana, despite whatever perceived advantages or disadvantages on either side you would have. The fact of the matter is she went in there and did what she did. Who's to say that she's not proud of her performance as is? Y'all keep trying to make excuses about it and say, oh, it's this, that, and the third. They agreed to the fight. They didn't have to. They chose that. Whatever you're seeing out of it, that's not the way they viewed it, or they wouldn't have done the fight. If they felt like it was wrong, if they felt like it was something that was unfair, they wouldn't have done the fight. And I'm not talking about the promotion. I'm not talking about the people who are holding the fight. I'm talking about Celine and her team. There was a group of men and women, most likely, in her corner that trained her, that sanctioned her to fight this person, etc. This isn't an isolated thing. This isn't some big Dana White looking dude who greenlit this whole thing and he just likes to see this kind of thing. Like, no. Everyone was under the same understanding and knew exactly what was at hand and agreed to the fight, wanted to do it, felt like it was something that they were passionate about. It's something that they do for a living and they want to get paid to do it, and they want to entertain their fans with this sort of thing. This was all agreed upon. For you to look at it in any sort of other way is almost disrespectful to Celine and Alana, if you ask me. Okay? Now I do think that this is a bit much. I don't agree with this kind of thing being a normal thing. I don't think that this type of thing should continue, and I don't think that it should have ever happened in the first place. But if we're being real, this is kind of how society has led people to think that you can do all these things that a man can do. Why wouldn't you be able to fight a man then if we're all equal and we're all the same? There's a clear difference, and we've been trying to hammer this into your head the entire time. And you have to blame these sorts of people that go too far with it like that. Like y'all won't let it be. Y'all won't just tell the truth. There comes a point in which we have to just be factual about things, and you ignored these and you continued to egg things on. And it leads to this sort of thinking where they think that this can happen, where it's acceptable, where it's greenlit. Because the culture should have never gotten to a point where this was even thought of as a thing that could happen. This says a lot about the culture that a fight like this could ever take place in the first place. It says a lot about the culture that surrounds it. It's not just them. It's not just a fight promotion. It's the culture in totality that had everyone involved feel as if this was something that we could at least put our toes in the water about. We could at least test the waters about something like this. That's what the real question should be. Now, furthermore, was there an advantage or disadvantage? Clearly, I think Alana clearly had an advantage there. Like, the amount of shots that Alana was able to take, the amount of damage that they were able to take and still press forward. You know, I guess we'll really never know if Celine would have fought a person born a woman under the same or similar circumstances. Would it have ended the same way? We'll never know, because that kind of type of thing doesn't exist. But she fought Alana today, and I think that there is something to be said about the overall bone structure and muscle mass involved with being a man, genetically a man. There is something to be said about that, in terms of how much damage Alana was able to take. It is clear to me that Celine was the more skilled fighter in terms of striking, at the very least. But I can't take everything in the world away from Alana and say that, oh, you only won this because that's not entirely accurate. We can't say that there was no skill involved in how Alana fought at all, because there has to have been. Number one, they won the fight, and there was technique involved in various different methods that Alana used throughout the fight. So I'm not going to just chalk it up to just because they're a man and there's literally no skill involved, because I've heard these sort of sentiments be echoed, and it's just incorrect. There was some degree of skill involved. Now, was there an advantage or disadvantage on one from one fighter to the other based off of the fact that Alana is biologically a man? I would say that seems to be the case. I judge that almost strictly based off of the idea that Alana was able to come forward and take so much damage and eat so many types of shots, like you saw Alana. And now Alana seemed to be the power puncher. However, it seemed to be a bit of a clear difference that when Alana was able to land these sorts of shots, Celine was getting affected by them. Whereas whenever Alana was eating shots herself, Celine could keep peppering her with shots pretty continuously at certain points, especially there in round one, and Alana would just kind of walk through them. Now, to add some information to that, because I've seen people echoing that sentiment as well, Celine was also throwing, most of her shots were straight punches. A large percentage of her punches were straight. These aren't power punches. These aren't punches meant to deliver a bunch of power. They are good for establishing range. They're good for setting up shots. And they're good punches, no doubt. They do damage, but they're not necessarily a knockout punch. Now, Celine did throw a couple of hooks and a couple of uppercuts, and those are more so your knockout punches. And whenever she landed those shots, Alana did react. She did seem to get somewhat concussed and disoriented from the shots. So I don't think it's the difference is as abundant as everyone's trying to make it out to be. And more than anything, I just don't want to steal from Celine's performance or Alana's performance by trying to make this into something that it isn't, or cast down judgment on something that I don't know about, like everyone else has seemed to do. And at the same time, I don't want to absolve either fighter or the promotion or any of the coaches or anyone involved of any sort of accountability for what they've done. If you feel like this was an unfair thing, or whatever the case might be, then maybe you should bring this conversation up with Celine, because I'm willing to bet a lot of what you guys have said about this fight, Celine would go out of her way to disagree with. She wanted this fight, and she did the fight. Maybe she thinks differently following the fight, but at the time of the fight and prior to the fight, this was something that she wanted to do, felt confident in doing, and wanted to entertain her fans with, and we should respect that. And if anything, even if you can't respect that, you should be able to hold Celine to the accountability, like, hey, you thought you could win this fight, but you couldn't. It's no fault other than the fact that you didn't have enough talent. So I'll put it this way. You want to say that Alana had an unfair advantage? Put Celine Provost in there against Amanda Nunes or Chris Cyborg. It would have been a lot worse, my guy. A lot worse. You put Celine in there against some of these top tier female fighters, a lot worse. Whatever you think this Alana Mclaughlin is just a dude in there beating up on Celine, you're crazy. Put her in there with Amanda Nunes or Chris Cyborg and see what happens, dude. If you have sympathy for this, or you feel some sort of way about this, you feel like it's unfair and it's just brutal, this blood sport, you don't watch enough mixed martial arts, man. It gets a lot worse. Oh man, he just in there beating up on that poor girl. I've seen fights where it was a guy versus a guy or a girl versus a girl, and many fights, and it looked like a pit bull eating up a chihuahua. Okay, man, it can get bad. This is fighting. Okay, it happens. So I'm just not going to have sympathy for it, and I'm not going to absolve anyone of responsibility for it, and I'm not going to try to look at it in some sort of way that it's not meant to be. And like I said, if you guys have a problem with that, maybe you should go talk to Celine Provost about it, because I'm pretty sure she would disagree with you in a lot of ways. You're robbing her of what she wanted to do here, and you're absolving her of responsibility. Dave Chapelle released a special not too long ago called The Closer. Amazing show, by the way. I felt like it sort of took that medicine and the candy approach of giving us half of what we wanted versus half of what we need. Half of what we wanted, meaning we got to laugh. There was some comedy in it. Half of what we needed, meaning he did what we needed him to do. What I feel like maybe only him and a few other people can even do, and that is to go up there and say the things that the world needs to hear. And that is some very culture forwarding things. At the conclusion, no pun intended, closer, the conclusion of the show really was putting people in this sort of ultimatum position that says, hey, either you understand and you get it, this makes sense, and you can't keep the same stance going forward. We have to acknowledge these sorts of things and change and evolve and grow, and you have to see this for what it is and come to a mature conversation about this so that we can move forward, so that we can bring attention to things that need attention brought to them. Or you make it known that you have no intention of actually taking a logical, empathetic approach. Watch the special. I don't want to spoil the whole thing for you or anything, but ultimately he puts everybody in a position where it's like, how can you understand empathy or desire empathy and have empathy towards people that you can identify with, or you pick and choose where you're empathetic, in terms of meaning when it comes to transgenders and people who are homosexual. How can you have empathy towards these sorts of movements, but whenever it happens, whenever the case is involving one of a black man or black people in general, how come you have no empathy all of a sudden? How come the empathy goes out of the window? He gives a couple of jokes on how that's the case, meanwhile talking about it, but ultimately it comes down to this sort of ultimatum, like, do you understand, or are you going to plead ignorance? And it's almost calling people on their BS, I mean, to me, it was almost a rebuttal, if anything. It was sort of like him covering all of his bases and putting his opposition in the corner, right? Like, so he gives this example of a friend of his who was a transgender who defended him, and the sort of jokes that he had given off in the past, that he had told in his past specials and on stage in the past, and that person was attacked repeatedly until they eventually committed suicide. They committed suicide in the face of exactly what Dave Chappelle himself faced, and is what he's going to face as a result of this special that he put out, right? So he knows what they're going to do and what they're going to say, and it's almost like that whole, Eminem in the last battle on 8 Mile kind of thing, taking all the power out of your punches by saying, I know I'm this, and I know you're going to do this, that, and the third, and this is why you're wrong, and this is why none of that means anything. So he kind of takes a similar approach in that, hey, I know that y'all are going to bully me on social media, and you're going to try to bully the people who defend me on social media, and look what that led to. This is what you really are, and this is what you're doing leads to, and it's wrong. So it takes the power out of their next move, and their go-to move is always to bully someone. Why is that happening? Bully people on social media, right? And so he knows that they're going to go about doing that, and he calls them out on it before they ever even get the move to do it. And you can't say, hey, I'm homophobic, or anything like that, or I'm anti-trans or anything like that, because I have a friend very near and dear to me. I let them open for me. I paid them to do this, that sort of thing. It was a very close friend of mine, and he even sarcastically calls himself transphobic and homophobic throughout the special. To me, it's a very calculated method that he's gone about using in this special. It's more than just laughs, and it's more than just a position that he's taking. It's an overall, it's almost like a chess move. It's cornering these people that he's almost baiting into attacking him. He's cornering them into making a different move. You have to see things the way that they really are, and there's no way for you to semantic your way out of it or anything like that. You have to see it for what it is. Everybody else sees it. I'm saying what everybody else is already thinking, and that is that the way that you're going to try and worm your way out of this, it's not going to work this time. Like, we all see it. And so he brought up the Baby as an example, the rapper DaBaby, right? So if you're not familiar, he said something about, well, I'm not going to repeat it, but let's just say he said something that was offensive to the homosexual LGBTQ plus community, whatever you want to call it. He said something offensive to them, and they tried to cancel him for it. Maybe he is, maybe he's not, who cares? But he brought that up as an example and said, so he says this, and you have no empathy for him. He doesn't understand that what he did was wrong, but you immediately threw the book at him regardless. Now let's take a step backwards and say, well, look at what DaBaby's gone through. He's had his life and family jeopardized and threatened to the point where he felt like he needed to defend himself with a weapon, and he's done so. This is the type of trauma that he's been through, and this is where he comes from, and you can't understand that. You've had no empathy for that. And whenever he went through what he went through, and what a lot of black men all across America go through, you seem to have no degree of empathy for it. Where was all the rallying then? And it's really the same case across the board with when anything sort of happens, and that's why I brought it up, that we were able to make so much happen and so much change happen in regards to the trans and homosexual community, if that's what you want to call it, in such a short period of time, whereas we've been having to be on the forefront of fighting for black people and them being treated equally for so long and have found so little progress. And it's just where is the same, keep that same energy kind of message is where he's coming from, I think. And per usual, I'm not pro absolving people of responsibility, right? Because in a lot of cases we have made a push for change in the black community. People rallied for this, right? And I've been critical of it the whole time for a number of reasons, and one of those reasons is kind of like what Dave said. He was like, hey, I would be willing to help the LGBTQ community. I can help you guys, and he makes a joke about it, saying that I would do it for X amount of millions of dollars or something like that. But seriously, I think that that's part of the problem within the black community, and sue me for telling the truth, but the case is this: if you know your history, then you know that back in the day, it wasn't just about black people coming together. It was also about the white people who also agreed with their sentiment. It was like a bunch of black people who wanted to get up and do something about it, and also a bunch of white people who felt that the black people were being treated unfairly as well. This is what brought together change. It wasn't because in modern day America, it comes to be about, well, it's black people coming up to rise and gain this sort of influence so that we can make change for ourselves. And then whenever white people is like, yeah, they come up, they're like, yeah, I agree, they want to demonize them for it. They want to push them back out. Well, you wouldn't get it because this, that, and the third, and you should be apologetic because this, that, and the third. You won't even let them support you. And in the past, that's exactly what happened. There were powerful, influential white people with education. That's what it took. It took people who were educated, who were leaders, who were organized to come forward and to do that. And in order for you to gain a significant degree of control is for you to have a mass. You have to have a majority of people come together and say, hey, this is wrong. Once the majority says so, it's the case, regardless if it changes in law or not. It's literally a matter of time. If the majority says XYZ, it's nearly written in law at that point. It just has to be written down. The minority will not be able to refute it, even if it is incorrect. And you can't have a majority if you stick to, well, only black people are allowed to support this, and we're only accepting black people into the group. You can't have it. There's not enough black people, In order for you to have a majority, you're going to need the help of people who are of different races. And this whole demonizing of white people is never going to get you very far, especially when you're looking for empathy. How can, again, to echo your sentiment and to use the same argument against you, how can you ask for empathy and not show it? They are trying to show empathy for your situation, sympathy for your situation, and at the same time, they're looking for sympathy to be shown towards theirs. This is things that they regret from their own heritage, and they regret that you had to go through it. Let them help you. This is the only way to success. And then Dave Chapelle asked in the special, how were the LGBTQ community able to make it so far in such a short period of time? Yes, it is partially due to the case that we're showing a much more urgent sort of we're more the culture seems to be more urgent in their actions towards developing those sorts of things and heeding to these sorts of messages there, as opposed to the black community. But at the same time, the LGBTQ community is composed of both black and white people. They can amass a community, and they're willing to allow people outside of their community to help them. But regardless, furthermore, the overall message of what Dave Chapelle was saying, it still hits. And the fact that these news outlets and all of these people are reacting exactly as he said they would, to me it says that either one, you didn't listen to the special, you don't know what he said per usual, or number two, you heard it and you fell right into the trap anyways for whatever reason. And anybody who has a level head and a decent bit of logic and maturity to them after seeing the special can tell what these people are. And to be honest, they don't need to be in the conversation anymore. To me, that as soon as they take those sort of stances that he had sort of predicted them to take, or is a typical way of going about trying to create misunderstandings and trying to create narratives about the conversation that didn't exist, anybody who can't come to it from a more human, down-to-earth perspective and seriously have a conversation about how we can move forward in these sorts of things, anybody who does anything other than that, I think that there's no point in listening to them. We shouldn't support any news outlets or any channels or anything like that talks about those sorts of things or is framing it in that way. And we shouldn't take anybody seriously who tries to take that stance. Don't reward these kinds of people that take these sorts of stances, because they're up to no good. There's no point in listening to them. They're choosing ignorance, and they're out for something other than a resolution. And it's a waste of our time if anybody actually wants to move forward with it. And that goes for anybody on either side. Speaking of medicine and the candy, we have a interview with Camille Paglia. She's a very interesting and intelligent woman, and I think she's actually rather humorous. You'll notice throughout this video. but she says a lot of things that to me are very forward thinking, different perspective from what most people are willing to think about even today. And this was an interview back in 1992. Just goes to show how much she is ahead of her time in a lot of different ways. And I think that a lot of these sentiments I would echo myself, but perhaps you guys will be willing to listen if it's coming from a woman.
You have a different view on Anita Hill. We would just take one small focus issue. You just heard Ruth Mandel say that Anita Hill is the hero for women in politics in 1992.
I just reject that totally. I think that Anita Hill is an intelligent woman who put her careerist interests above feminist principle and had no right to stand on feminist principle 10 years down the line. I think that Clarence Thomas may have been offensive. He may have been off base and used blue language and so on. But it was Anita Hill's responsibility to deal with that on the spot. I do not feel she was the victim of sexual harassment. I feel she was made uncomfortable by sexual language.
What would have made her a victim of sexual harassment?
If there had been a quid pro quo, if he had laid a hand on her and so on, I support sexual harassment guidelines. I think it's a wonderful innovation of contemporary feminism. But I think the hostile workplace category is really going overboard. I think that I'm radical on the subject of free speech. If someone offends you by speech, you must fight back by speech. We must make middle-class women able to use aggressive speech against their assailants. I do not believe there should be any policing of speech, per se. So I think that Clarence Thomas merely talking about pornography, to me, that was welcome. I am radically pro-pornography. I'm delighted he talked about pornography. You see, like my father, who taught at a religious college, would not have tolerated bawdy talk. He would have gotten up from a table and walked away from it. My father would have given up a job rather than to put up with it. So I don't think it's a feminist issue. I think Anita Hill simply, went along to get along. And her long-standing friendship with Clarence Thomas shows the fact that, in point of fact, she was not that upset by it. She was distressed at the time, but it didn't make any deep change in her life.
But even
Imagine I've never seen a woman that would say something like that. It's so true, and we all know it to be true, but none of them will come to the forefront and say these sorts of things because it gives up advantages. It gives up powers that they have if they just cast stones and hide their hands. I have to commend this level of honesty and just being blunt. It's extremely commendable.
10 years later. And what are we living in, a totalitarian regime where one has to defend oneself against conversations? I mean, 10 years later to reconstruct conversations one had. I mean, I am guilty 1,000 times over of the kind of sexual harassment Clarence Thomas was accused of.
the opportunity for her to say no and don't ever mention that in my presence or to walk away. It was incumbent on her to do that or not raise those charges.
That's right. Her responses were very ambiguous. She told the story in the Senate hearings of having been at a government cafeteria with Clarence Thomas, and he brought up pornography again, and the senators asked her, "What did you do?" She said, "I tried to change the subject." And I thought, this is peculiarly passive. This is not appropriate to feminism.
Accountability, responsibility. All I'm saying is they're not children. Treat them as adults. That's all I'm saying.
I know part of your argument, too, is about women as victims, which you don't like to think of.
I hate
You hate that idea.
I hate victim-centered ideology.
Yeah.
That is, I stress self-reliance, independence, personal responsibility, and not blaming other people for your problems.
Yeah. But
Camille is also still active today in the scene. She actually just, not too long ago, had a conversation with Jordan Peterson.
Holding sort of coddling, whining things that have been going on in the last 20 years. I'm really out of sync with current feminism. And you see, feminists don't even recognize their own history. Because I am a product of the great feminist movement of the early part of the century.
And
this male bashing that's been going on the last 20 years has to stop. Amelia Earhart did not ask for special standards for women. She set herself the standards of men, as did Katharine Hepburn. I have also held myself to the highest standards of the history of mankind. I have tried to study the best that has been written, the best that has been thought, the greatest works of art. And now we have a kind of recipe for second-rateness in the last 20 years. I'm very, very unhappy with the education being given our best young women.
Sorry, man, it's hard to talk over this one. You just got to let her go, It's like the interviewer's doing here. You just kind of talk, give her a couple of points, and just let her preach. She's talking the truth. And like I said, I can't say some of the things that she's saying and anybody listen to me. She's going to be the one that has to say it. But as you can see, she's a very intelligent person. She knows her stuff, and she's really about it. This kind of stuff I can respect. You coming up and telling me that you're a feminist and this is what you stand for and this is the way that you move, I can absolutely respect this. But if you're talking about the vast majority of the stuff that's out here, it's not that. She even made a clear distinction herself here in the video, saying that this sort of feminism that's out here today is not what it was founded upon. This is not what it really is about, and it doesn't do anybody any favors, let alone women themselves. It doesn't do them any favors, and it's a sort of a weak approach, lacking any sort of responsibility. I agree entirely, and it seems as though the roots of what feminism agrees entirely as well. What we have today walking around is a sort of victim ideology that is separated itself based off of demographic factors and twisted different things here and there, like she says, victim ideology and whatnot, in a way that things become advantageous to them, and that's really all it is. It's a power struggle, and it has nothing to do with anything else. But this here I can respect, but what we have around us today is what I like to call neo-feminism, and it's not. It's the same thing with the whole Chapelle topic, right? Like the end result and what we're arguing for here, it has nothing to do with what's right and what's wrong. It has to do with how you can manipulate the situation, how you can put the center of attention on yourself, and use your demographics powers to your advantage. Like how can you angle this to a way that's advantageous for you, is what it seems like to me.
Susan Sontag's got another book out. Susan
Oh,
Sontag
it's
is
a novel. It's a very poor novel,
okay,
too. A dull novel.
And she drives you crazy.
Well,
she drives you.
yes.
She
I've been
refuses
following
to
her.
acknowledge your existence.
Well,
says she doesn't even know you.
Even though there's a picture of us in 1973, and her son attacks me in Vanity Fair. Well, you see, she
my
belongs
God.
to a generation that's gone. For 20 years, her reputation has been way in excess of her actual achievement. She was wonderful in the late 60s, but I'm afraid she's being propped up by a very corrupt New York literary establishment that I am bent on bringing down.
How is she being? Okay, first, how is she being propped
Well,
up?
look at that New York Times Sunday magazine article. I was absolutely servile
I
toward
bet
her.
it drove you crazy.
Utterly
It
uncritical.
drove you
It
crazy to
released
see
me
he
from
there.
any- it
Drove you
released me-
crazy. There she is in a magnificent.
You see the humor I'm talking about. She's hilarious, right? Now, before we go any further, I challenge any of you, I don't care who you are. I'm serious. She is like the female's version of Jordan Peterson. This is who I believe women should be looking to. I mean, amongst many others, but this is one that should absolutely be your role model if you have your head screwed on right. And I challenge any of you to go back and forth with her. You're not smart enough. You're not powerful enough. You're not really about any of the things that you say that you're about, and you couldn't go toe to toe with her on your best day on her worst.
Of that.
You don't care about the enemies you make.
No, I'm a combatant. I'm one of the most aggressive women currently alive. I love the combat.
Yeah.
Now, I said that it was probably a woman like Camille that would be the only person that could talk on this. But I stand corrected. There's also a guy named Joe Rogan. I'm pretty sure you ever heard of him. Pretty sure you're familiar with him, Joe Rogan. Okay. Anyways, this is Joe Rogan. He has a podcast called the Joe Rogan Experience, and this isn't his first rodeo show of calling people out on their BS. He did this with Adam Ruins Everything, right? So Adam Ruins Everything came onto his show, and ended up ruining himself. Like Joe called him out on a bunch of stuff that he just got wrong, and he ended up dumbfounded for words. And again, this isn't the first time this has happened. I couldn't find the video, but I felt like it was like a Twitter executive or something like that, or a journalist of some kind or something like that. And he ended up calling them out on how they come about distributing the information that they do. I mean, we all know that they put out a bunch of load of BS, and he ended up calling them out on that and having them tongue-tied for their methods. And he had Matt, I think his name is Tim Pool on with a social media executive as well, and basically had them admitting that they not only silence certain messages, but they also let's say put other messages to the forefront, right? So it is rooted in manipulating your thought process, and he got them to admit these things. And here he is again on the news for exposing someone, Sanjay Gupta. Y'all heard this guy on CNN. I believe he's some sort of doctor, right? Or something like that. Regardless, he's been all over CNN well, watch for yourself. This is yet another example of Joe Rogan doing what he does, and that's, outing these guys who go about spreading false information as they do, and he does it again. I don't even know why they come to his podcast. They smile on his face thinking that he's not going to do what he's going to do. He's going to do it. Anyways, we'll get into the video. I don't want you guys to be listening to me talk the whole time. I'm sure you'd rather listen to Joe.
So for you, Joe Rogan,
Yes.
I would say you've had it.
Yes.
So now get one shot of the vaccine.
No.
Why not?
Because I have better immunity than I would if I was vaccinated.
Right?
Yes. Don't I?
I think your immunity is really good.
So why, if I've already gotten through COVID and I was really only sick for a day, and then 5 days later I was negative, and I do have the natural antibodies now, why would I take a chance in getting vaccinated on top of that?
By the way, I'm glad you're better. I'm glad it only lasted a day.
You're probably the only one at CNN that's glad.
No. We're not.
The rest of them are all lying about me taking horse medication. And we should talk about that.
That bothered you.
It should bother you, too. They're lying at your network about people taking human drugs versus drugs from veterinary.
Calling it a horse dewormer is not a flattering thing. I get that.
It's a lie. It's a lie on a news network, and it's a lie that's a willing... That's a lie that they're conscious of. It's not a mistake.
Yeah.
They're unfavorably framing it as veterinary medicine.
Well, the FDA put this thing out. You saw that. Did you see that thing that the FDA put out?
What did the FDA put out?
It was a tweet, and it was snarky. I admit it. They said, "You are not a horse. You are not a cow. Stop taking this stuff," or something like that.
Why would you say that when you're talking about a drug that's been given out to billions and billions of people, a drug that was responsible for one of the inventors of it winning the Nobel Prize in 2015?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, a drug that has been shown to stop viral replication in vitro. You know that, right? Why would they lie and say that's horse dewormer? I can afford people medicine, motherfucker.
If you got a human pill, because there were people that were taking it, the veterinary medication, and you're not, obviously. You got it from a doctor, so that it shouldn't be called that. Ivermectin can be a very effective medication for parasitic disease, and as you say, it's probably, I think, 250 million people have taken it around the world.
More,
I get that.
Way more.
So
way more. Billions of people have taken it.
Can I just come back to the one I want to talk about? Two things on
you
the ledger.
You have, before we get to that, does it bother you that the news network you work for out and out lied?
You see how he pulled it back like that? There's not very many interviewers that would have been able to do that to him.
I don't know.
You didn't ask? You didn't think that was you're the medical guy over there.
I didn't ask. I should have asked before.
But they did it with such glee.
No,
yes,
Joe.
they did. I watched.
You watched?
I watched.
You watched.
Watch this.
Yes, they did.
No one takes.
Joe Rogan says he has COVID, taking livestock drug despite warnings. Yeah.
Jamie had to pull this up.
You want to play it?
Does she?
This is your news network.
I'm gonna watch.
Let's see.
I'm gonna watch.
The nervousness.
Rogan telling his 13 million Instagram followers that he was treated with several drugs, and he included ivermectin on the list, a drug used for
nervously drinking water. Go ahead.
The CDC warned against using to treat COVID.
Turns out I got COVID.
Look, they put a yellow filter on me
threw
too.
The kitchen sink at it. All kinds of meds. Monoclonal,
you see the original video versus that? I look like shit there.
Z-Pack,
do you know that?
I think you look good.
Pause. It's enough.
Prednisone.
That's enough, Jamie.
I don't think Aaron had glee.
Oh well, it's more Brian Stelter was the gleeful one. But the point is, that's a lie.
It can be used for humans. I get it. I totally...
Not just could be used for humans, is often used for humans along with all the other drugs I took. All human drugs.
Yes.
They know it's a human drug.
It's right. But
they lied.
The thing
it's defamatory.
It is yeah, they shouldn't have done that.
It's defamatory, right?
Well, I don't know if it's defamatory.
I bet it.
Wow, still won't admit it. He's loyal.
Well, see, here's the thing. You can have nuanced discussions about this.
No,
right?
you can't.
Yeah,
you can't have nuanced discussions about lying about someone taking horseshoe
There
wormer.
was no glee, by the way, from her. She
well,
was. I don't think anyone takes people's illness.
Oh, yes, they do.
They don't want you to get sick, Joe.
Yes, they do.
They
were
want you to get
upset
sick.
that I got healthy. That's one thing they didn't report on. The fact that I was negative 5 days later.
Yeah, I agree with Sanjay on that part. I don't think that they necessarily care whether or not he's sick. I think it's just really about their job. I don't believe they have I don't think they're partial to any one emotion about it. It's just they're going to do it from a soulless perspective regardless.
Organization, if they're lying about a comedian taking horse medication, what are they telling us about Russia?
And we'll end it on that note. However, Joe did, sheesh. So if you like the video, please like the video. That's what the like button is for. And if you want to see more content like this, then subscribe. That's what the subscription button is for. See, I'm getting a little bit better at this, minus a stutter. Comment section. I like comments. I want to hear what you guys have to think about it. I want to hear from the people who love me, from the people who hate me, from the people who agree, from the people who disagree. Agree and disagree to your heart's content. Genuinely, though, I want to hear more of a discussion about this. That way we can forward this. But there's a difference between an argument where people are just insulting each other and a conversation where there is a end goal in mind, right? I want everyone to come to a better understanding. That's what I'm hoping the comment section can genuinely be about more often than not. In any other case, I'm willing to, in fact, I invite comments about the quality of my content. I'm trying to do better as time goes on, and so I hope you enjoyed this video more than you did the last. In any case, thank you guys for sticking around. Thank you guys for clicking on the video to begin with, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Peace.